What's going on, guys? It's Ross here, finally back on MGF Customs for the very long-awaited custom LEGO minifigure showcase video to celebrate The Mandalorian Season 2. And for this video, we have Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan, both inspired by their live-action debuts, Boba Fett and Luke Skywalker, along with two Dark Troopers, then both Koska Reeves and Woves are here too as half customs to support Bo-Katan. It's been a while, guys. This project has been in the works on and off for almost a year now, and to be honest, I don't know where 2021 went. But as always, I really appreciate those of you who continue to support the work whenever I do finish a showcase. And kind of like Avengers Endgame, The Mandalorian Season 2 had so much to love and was so special that to me, it would always be worth celebrating whenever that is. But I did not mean for that to be a year later. Anyway, most of these customs were a pretty big undertaking with challenges along the way and an ungodly number of hours spent on each one of them throughout the year, on and off. And since I'll probably forget, practically every custom in this video is 100% hand painted too, if it isn't obvious. So I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a like. It would mean a lot, and you can use the chapters to skip around, of course, along the bottom. It's a long video. I am so proud of all the figures you're about to see, though. They're some of my best work, and this will be the last Star Wars showcase for a while. Now finally, with all of that said, here we go. After 12 years as the animated character so many of us grew up with, Dave Filoni finally brought Ahsoka Tano into live action with Rosario Dawson in Chapter 13, The Jedi. And that was one hell of a night. Making the first ever live-action interpretation of Ahsoka as a custom LEGO minifigure became a top priority for me, and I got started pretty much right away, but I really underestimated just how much work would be required to pull this figure off. I know some of you followed along for the update videos on here or on Patreon and saw the beginning of the sculpted headpiece. Ahsoka's montrals and Leku are shorter in The Mandalorian and styled in a new way. That had to be reflected in the sculpting work after I had initially sanded down or removed sections of Lego's old Clone Wars Ahsoka headpiece. And after a long process of sculpting and sanding, I eventually got the base piece where it needed to be. The headband had to be sculpted on in different sections though, and one of the top tips even broke off at one point, and tons of drilling had to be done inside to accommodate the eventual painted face that I'll talk about in a second. And we'll also come back to her lightsabers a little bit later because I do want to get them out of the way so we can see the rest of the figure. But yeah, the paintwork was far more tedious on the head tails. Working with white paint is never fun, and this time I had to fit more smaller and thinner stripe designs onto this shorter headpiece sculpt. For example, Ahsoka's head tails from the Clone Wars Season 7 were far easier because the shaping was simpler and the stripes were a lot thicker. And I did get through it eventually though. It's just organization is really needed with stuff like this. I didn't actually even finish all of these stripe designs up until pretty recently too on the back here. Alright, now, so I painted Ahsoka's face design by hand and watched that drilling work come into play when I can seamlessly pull that off with no problems. I painted the face design to match Rosario Dawson's likeness with some inspiration taken directly from Phoenix Customs' upcoming printed figure, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. Phoenix was actually like the one who sort of convinced me that Lego's dark orange would make much more sense for the live action version of Ahsoka here too. Basically, Clone Wars Ahsoka definitely needs to be bright orange, but bright orange becomes too bright for the tones applied to Rosario's face in The Mandalorian. That brings us to her torso and arms though, and as always, this is an aerialite curved torso as the base, and I built onto it with a bunch bunch of custom cut pieces of Cape Madness fabric and a 3D waistband right here. And what was really time consuming though, of course, were the painted stitching dash marks that wrap around the torso. Those are always so time consuming, and also the thin strips of fabric that were precisely cut and glued around the entire torso too after the paintwork was done. That still doesn't even include the silver belt buckle I installed right here, or the bit of thread I glued onto the front with the beads all individually painted. This broke off at one point too. More recently though, I installed a lot more pieces of thread onto her lower back, and these were much harder to get in place. Eventually I did though, and I sculpted a knot over the top of them and painted over as much of the exposed glue as I could. Moving back up to the arms though, the sculpted gauntlets and their painted detail were fairly easy, but my god, everything else, matching the skin tone, the diamonds, and painting all of these patterns and lines, yeah, these were a nightmare and almost worse than painting Spider-Man webbing, if I'm being honest. Of course, her hands also feature the necessary painted detail too, and of course, you know, it is on both arms, so I had to do my best to keep these as symmetrical as possible. Again, it was not fun. Now, her waist cape, as always, is a heavily modded and fully painted Cape Madness waist cape. There are some 3D bits on both sides of it, like right around here under those original beads, but all of these tiny little ovals that I had to paint on make up the bulk of all the work, and they each have about 3 layers, so this was very time consuming. I even had to redo the back of it at one point, but it was mostly time consuming because that pattern continues onto all 4 sides of her legs too. And the painted armor on her legs, along with the wraparound straps, all took a few days to complete too. Always tedious figuring out a painted design that extends not only onto the feet, but also down onto the toes. And you can see I've got that samurai inspired design painted onto each rim for each boot. Finally, Ahsoka's lightsabers were designed by Bacon King Lego and printed by Nate's Minifigs. We've got her primary defensive hilt, and of course the smaller Shoto blade painted up here. The clear blades themselves I kind of just stole from my ancient 2015 Rebels custom that we don't really talk about anymore. But yeah, even now, I still don't take for granted the fact that Ahsoka has finally made the leap into live action, and I cannot wait to see where Rosario Dawson goes next with her as she hunts down Grand Admiral Thrawn, also in live action in the Ahsoka series. God, I can't believe that's a real thing we can still say. And I also can't believe Rosario Dawson saw this custom twice now. That's a flex, I'm sorry. But it makes the ungodly amount of work that went into this instantly worth it. Katie Sackhoff's surprise debut as Bo-Katan, also in live action for Chapter 11, The Heiress, was also just mind-blowing. We knew it was happening, but we didn't know which episode, so when she literally descended into the show out of nowhere to save Din Djarin, I had an out-of-body experience.
There you'll find Ahsoka Tano.
I was so excited to make the first ever live action version of Bo, and she would have never looked this good without the help of LM9 Productions for the casted helmet and Nate's Minifigs for most of the 3D printed armor pieces. And despite all of the acquired parts that saved on so much sculpting work, this was still a pretty challenging figure to paint. The sand blue was a mix that took a couple tries to get right, and then all of the weathering and battle damage was carefully done to be as accurate as possible. The battle damage on Bo's helmet and the shoulders, which you'll see in a sec, I think are pretty much 1-to-1 with the show, and it was actually really fun to paint. This started as a cast of LM9's piece by Forge 510, and then the painted rangefinder plugged into the side of it is a 3D print by one of my best friends, Andrew, over at AV Figures. Underneath the helmet, you can see I've got a gray head to match with the rest of her suit, and I also sculpted and painted the armor plates around the neck here, and she's got an Arielite curved torso as a base as well, and the armor pieces on it, along with the belts, were 3D printed by Nate's Minifigs and then painted by me. Real quick, she has a pair of Westar 35 blasters by Brick Arms with just a tiny bit of gunmetal painted into the tips. Will Chapman over at Brick Arms got a full wave for the Mandalorian Season 2 released pretty fast after the episodes were out. Bo's arms were really complicated with the sculpted armor I did before Nate's Minifigs started making his pieces. And fun fact, I engraved all of the gauntlet detail while Hayden Christensen was being officially confirmed to return in the Kenobi series during the big Disney Investors live stream in 2020. But you can see those battle damage screen accurate shoulders I mentioned a second ago with the painted Night Owl symbols. Her right gauntlet actually has a little pin integrated into it for the flamethrower that she didn't use, and her left one has the Whistling Bird launcher sculpted on too, with each of those slots engraved. You would have also noticed by now that I've got the glove detail painted onto each hand, but let me tell you, the lines in the center of each arm were not fun. The stitching dash marks again, the zigzag designs on the back of each arm. Yeah, it was all very tedious. Her jetpack is really detailed too and took a while to paint. I'm really happy with it though. It's fully accurate to how it looks in the show. This actually started out as one of Tuminio's original Mandalorian jetpacks, except I got rid of the thrusters on the bottom and resculpted the rocket tip up here. And I also just remembered this back piece that it's magnetically connected to also started out as another 3D printed piece from Tuminio 2. Now, Bo's legs were really complicated. First off, I cut and painted removable straps from bits of Cape Madness waist capes, and then I glued in more pieces of fabric into each one to create the holsters. But the paintwork on the legs themselves was very time consuming as well. I cut and glued this painted 3D piece in place first, but the amount of stitching marks that had to be painted around all four sides was kind of insane. First though, I actually installed the 3D printed knee pads by Nate's Minifigs and painted those. Otherwise, yeah, you can see the boot detail and the painted armor plates on the sides, and again, just so many stitching marks. And the thing about painting them like this is obviously they have to be really organized going around all four sides, and you kind of have to maintain the straight look for each one of them so that once I go through and tick off each individual dash mark, they obviously line up and it's consistent looking for the most part. And just like I said, very time consuming and very tedious. But then regardless of how much work goes in, Lego's plastic doesn't care and there's still a crack at the bottom of the foot. Finally, I did put together an alternate unmasked Bo-Katan head to match Katie Sackhoff's live action appearance as the character. I added some additional markings to the face, like the scar she has right up here, before sealing them over and repainting the lip color, but the hairpiece with the headband integration would not have been possible without Astar Bricks. They sent over a couple extras they had of their 3D printed piece, which I really appreciated. I also did sculpt an extension onto it that you might have seen inside there, which was not easy and definitely took a couple tries, and then I cleaned it up and it's all fully painted with another mixed color, and I really like how the lights in the headband turned out especially. And that's finally it for Bo-Katan. The night Chapter 11 started streaming was so completely surreal, I couldn't believe my eyes throughout the entire Gazanti freighter infiltration, watching Bo-Katan in real armor with other Mandos who we had only ever seen previously in animations suddenly blasting through hallways of stormtroopers. I barely slept from all the excitement. One last thing. This is my first ever Bo-Katan custom I painted way back in like 2012. Look at that. I think it's pretty wild. Tamura Morrison, probably the coolest New Zealander to ever live, is finally back in Star Wars, returning front and center as Boba Fett in Chapter 14, The Tragedy. And this custom here is of course inspired by the 2 episodes after, once Boba had repainted his armor, and some of you might remember I had actually painted an entire helmet for him with all the battle damage still during that week in between when we didn't know Boba would repaint his armor before Chapter 15. But thankfully this was about the time when Nate's Minifigs started producing his own 3D printed parts for customizers, and one of his first sets was Boba Fett, and I was blown blown away, and since then he has sent so many incredible accessories that are all so perfect for what we do. I feature them on Instagram, my second channel, all the time because Nate's work has genuinely been game-changing for this community. But it started first with Boba Fett, and you saw a few of his accessories on Bo-Katan a minute ago too, and even more so than her, the amount of time saved on sculpting work for Boba thanks to Nate's work is pretty astronomical. So the entire figure is fully painted by me though, including his helmet, which includes little details like the bits of remaining scratches. I drilled in the dent from Cad Bane here. Nate does actually offer these with the dent now, by the way. All these stripes here took a while to get on there, and keeping all of those straight and clean wasn't easy, but really what wasn't easy with Boba's helmet was the micro magnet mod I did for his rangefinder. So Boba's rangefinder is actually attached via a tiny micro magnet that I attached and sculpted over into the bottom of the piece, and then I have another magnet inside the helmet itself. So this was really not easy to do, and I did break one of Nate's rangefinders on the first attempt and a couple of my own small drill bits, but thankfully though it really worked out. And there were more prerequisite mods that were required before installing like half of these armor pieces. For instance, I did sculpt a little bit of bulk onto the torso before bonding the chest plate to it, and you'll notice I painted the red lights onto the right side of the chest here, the other little symbol onto the left, and all of that was pretty tedious too, obviously. And I did drill in more battle damage here too, and the painted belt was similarly bonded in place with a bit more sculpting work. Now I want to show you Boba's jetpack, which was simpler than Bo-Katan's, but there were still a couple challenges like gluing in the bits of staples next to the main rocket, really just generally maintaining the outlines and making sure I had that figured out as I painted all the sand green on. I also got more of those little red lights painted in, which took a little bit of time, and various other details like the repaired section from when Han Solo damaged the back of the jetpack in Return of the Jedi. Removing it now though so you can see what looks like another one of Nate's simple back plates glued on with some cool painted detail like those clips on there. But really I did a heavy mod to the back by first drilling in 4 holes to accommodate and literally bury the protruding micro magnets inside the torso, and that was not fun, but it worked out, of course. But it worked out. Really quick, of course, Boba's EE3 carbine is iconic, and I've got it portrayed really well here thanks to the Brick Arms Reloaded version of the blaster I got from the Eclipse graphics crew. I did paint on some detail myself onto both sides of it as well. With that out of the way, we can finally talk about the arms, and the armor on Boba's right arm really needed its round of modding before gluing them in place, and that included drilling individual slots for each piece of thread inside his right gauntlet, and then to accommodate them, I had to hollow out his right shoulder pad underneath, and then once that was done, I was able to glue it over the cables, and I sculpted on the extra bits of robe pieces onto each arm, and eventually painted everything up, including all those details on each of those, and the Mythosaur symbol on his left shoulder pad, which I'm still really proud of. And also, you probably noticed by now, the glove detail that he has on each hand too. Now, originally, I had another modded and painted Cape Madness waist cape for Boba, but much later on and more recently, Broston over on Instagram came in with the save and pointed out that Boba actually just has really baggy pants and a single piece of his robes draping over both sides of his right leg. So I scrapped the first waist cape and did all of this instead with multiple pieces of cut fabric all glued together onto the belt piece and painted. I actually had already painted most of the legs, if I recall, before sculpting on the baggy pants, and the painted detail on the legs was difficult to achieve because not only are there stitching marks on the sides of each leg, but the rivets on each foot, the rivets on each boot, and the shade running through every very specific section of the design really took a good bit of time, and then I finally did glue on and sculpt the holster in place and added those strap pieces on there too. Finally painting Boba Fett's heavily burnt and scarred up skin onto one of LEGO's clone heads had been something I was dreading a bit because I had never done something like this before. I used the old makeshift Boba head I did back in 2020 as a starting point, figured out the process with 3 different paints, and got to work. It's all mostly screen accurate too, and you can see the scars and burns wrap around the entire head. Also, even I was surprised to find out I can still put Boba's helmet over the top of the head without damaging it, and I am just really proud of how this turned out. While the helmet is still off though, I can finally tell you Boba's scarf was sculpted on. I did it in such a way to leave breathing room for this eventual painted head that you just saw, and also space enough for the arms to still move as freely as possible with no issues. And also I kept it flat enough to where it would not interfere with Boba's jetpack being attached via those micro magnets. And of course, I know Boba appears to have received some kind of restorative back to treatment now in his own series though, so maybe after this I'll at least paint his eyebrows back on, but for now, that is it for Boba Fett from The Mandalorian Season 2. I almost definitely won't be making the new version for his series with those slightly new armor changes, although I am really looking forward to the Book of Boba Fett, and I am just so happy for Tamira Morrison and Ming-Na Wen. I can't believe the show is actually happening, and I can't wait to see what surprises it'll bring. The Mandalorian Season 2's finale, Chapter 16, The Rescue, arrived very unexpectedly when Luke Skywalker boarded Moff Gideon's cruiser and wiped out his entire battalion of Dark Troopers.
Oh my god! Here he comes! Here he comes! It's Luke Skywalker!
I still can't believe that sequence actually happened, and of course I had to make him in Lego. Luke here was actually the figure I was least concerned over because despite the sculpted hairpiece that you'll see in a sec and everything, he is still the simplest among the main group. So his hood started out as yet another 3D printed piece sent over by Nate's Minifigs, and I just sanded and sculpted an extension into it to cover more of his forehead before cleaning it up and painting it all in black. All I really did to Luke's face under there too was add a couple curves to the top of each eye, and I repainted his chin marks too. Real quick, his lightsaber was designed by OMV Customs and also casted by Forge 510 if I'm not mistaken. I just painted it up and sealed it over, and you might also be able to spot one of Nate's glove tops on his hand there. Taking a better look now at the rest of the figure with that out of the way, you can see all of the fabric painted in black and some of the 3D elements like his belt, which uses metallic black. At first, I honestly couldn't make out exactly what lines I needed to paint in the center, so I actually took a little inspiration from LM9's Luke for a lot of these robe designs. He also has a heavily modified and repainted Cape Madness waist cape as well, with a couple extra pieces attached and painted to continue those robes. Luke's legs don't have a whole lot going on, but I've got his boots painted on there in that same metallic black from the belt, and those wrinkle marks were specifically painted beforehand to actually make them look pressed inside the boots. Now we'll go ahead and remove his head and cape, which is also from Cape Madness by the way, to give you a better look at the back where all of that work continues with some more cool wrinkle marks. I really did try to keep these ones in particular looking natural to keep it consistent with the front. But now let's talk about the sculpted hairpiece. Of course, the regular hairpiece LEGO has always used for Luke since the dawn of time, aka when LEGO Star Wars started, is obviously iconic, but oh so wrong looking. So after coming up with a game plan using some more reference from Hot Toys and sanding a regular tousled side part hairpiece into oblivion, I successfully sculpted Luke's hairstyle after I want to say 3-ish sessions, and I am really proud of how this turned out. I didn't think I would be able to get this right without multiple attempts, but I got it right on the first try, cleaned it up, smoothed it over, and painted it, and I think that is Luke Skywalker. And that is it for the figure. I'd love to hear what you thought of the main 4 new customs down in the comments. Next up, we have our first of the 2 half customs in this showcase, Koska Reeves, as she appeared alongside Bo-Katan in Chapter 11. Now, I've only really made a couple half customs in the last year, so basically it's in the name. These are intentionally unfinished customs I sometimes make that only really go halfway. They're simpler and not nearly as detailed, but they still look good, and I'm sure you can already see the difference between Koska and Bo-Katan here. But Bo is looking really lonely without her 2 fellow Mandalorian resistance fighters that accompanied her in season 2, so I decided to at least make a couple half customs of them that could still support Bo-Katan, and there was especially no excuse to not at least do this when, once again, I had such great parts at my disposal readily available from Nate's Minifigs and LM9 Productions. I'm not really going to go into which parts I use for obvious reasons. The breakdown is almost exactly the same as Bo-Katan here. However, Koska's arms do feature Nate's Minifigs armor, whereas I had previously already sculpted Bo-Katan's shoulders and her gauntlets by hand myself before Nate started to 3D print his versions. However, you'll notice I did also skip the Night Owl symbols on these shoulders too, just again further emphasizing that point that these are half-made customs. Now, I did paint both Koska and Woves, who you will see in a second here, in such a way that I could continue the work if I really wanted to in the future. And for example, all of the battle damage on her helmet and her torso armor is done in exactly the same way I would do it on an actual finished custom of her. I also still did paint some of those stitching marks above her knee pads too, but that's really as far as I went. I really am especially happy with how the weathered battle damage effects turned out on her helmet, and yeah, I certainly could take this figure the rest of the way if I ever wanted to, but I probably won't, especially since she apparently isn't going to be appearing in The Mandalorian Season 3 for whatever reason. Okay, now like I said, Woves is the second half custom Mando resistance fighter here for the video. Except for him, I intentionally allowed the arms and legs to be inaccurate, so in this case here, I couldn't really just continue the work so easily into a full custom like I could with Koska, but again, I know I probably won't revisit these again, so I was fine with doing that here. So Woves is using a custom mixed blue color, and I did also weather up his painted helmet too, after performing the same micromagnet mod I did for Boba Fett's rangefinder, but on this helmet now. And special thanks to Nate for sending out the Mando Season 1 chess pieces specifically for this figure. I really appreciated that. This entire half custom also would not have been possible without him, as once again, these are all his 3D printed accessories just installed and painted by me. But yeah, otherwise that's really it for Woves. There isn't a whole lot going on here. Again, a half-made custom with some intentional inaccuracies just so that he can still be paired together with Bo-Katan. And I'm just hoping we'll still get to see this guy again, even if Koska won't be appearing in Season 3. We're coming up on the end of the lineup now, but here we have the Dark Troopers, courtesy of Tristan, the custom brick builder who actually had to leave the community over the summer, but he offered these 3D printed and fully articulated Dark Troopers in his store for a period of time, and I made sure to snag a set for this eventual video. And to me, these are the ultimate Lego Dark Troopers, right? I know a few of you might be quick to say that they don't look like Lego, but the Lego claws are there, and they have the Lego style Battle Droid feet too, which to me firmly cements them in Lego's aesthetic. They are a little fragile though, so bear with me, but their shoulders are articulated with ball joints, they have hinged elbows, ball jointed thigh pieces, and their knees are hinged too. Their blasters are also 3D printed by Tristan, but in black resin, I think. But upon careful examination, when I started to finally work on these guys, I realized all 4 hinge joints on both of these Dark Troopers would have a pretty bad rubbing problem if I painted them as they were, so I did have to carefully drill out space in 8 different spots for each Dark Trooper first. Then I painted everything you see on them, including the black metallic layer, obviously, after I had applied a base layer of matte black first. I watched basically the entire Money Heist series while working on just these guys, and to this day, I still cannot believe Jon Favreau and his crew actually swooped in with the Dark Troopers right out of Legends and put them front and center in The Mandalorian. It was so amazing. Din Djarin himself, The Mandalorian version 2, but this figure already got his own showcase back in 2020 that I'll link down below. However, I've painted him a couple new helmets since, so this is technically the third now. The second was Tuminio's version 2, which I still really like, by the way. It was just a little too open at the back, but thankfully I was fortunate enough to acquire an extra Cold Blood Customs helmet to paint up as a version 3, as these are considered to be like the gold standard for custom Lego Mandalorian helmets in the community, and it definitely felt like a bit of a crime to paint over the beautiful chrome finish that it comes in, but it had to be done to keep this consistent with my custom from 2020. Mando does also have his Beskar spear now, and this is also a piece by Tuminio, and thank God I had two of these because I broke the first one while painting it, but this one survived, and it's pretty awesome. There are other changes I wish I had time to make to Din Djarin, like the overly bulky chest piece, which is outdated now, or getting him one of Nate's Minifigs jetpacks, but I decided to move on with my life and preserve what little sanity I have left. But that is finally it for everyone in the Mandalorian Season 2 showcase. It has been a very long journey, so let me go ahead and savor the moment in saying, let's go ahead and start to wrap up this showcase. I am Jedi Master Plo Koon, and this is Ahsoka Tano. Still kind of a Jedi, but not really.
Hello, Mando. Bo, good to see you. Hey!
We are both survivors of the Great Jedi Purge, and are among the Jedi who chose to hide this whole time and not help you fight the Empire since the canon demanded it. The canon? Never mind. We understand you have been protecting this Force-sensitive child. Ahsoka tells me he too is a survivor of Order 66. Yes, but Ahsoka would not train him. That's fine. I shall train this baby who can't even speak yet to wield one of our deadly laser swords. You'll what?
Listen, Mando, I don't think this guy...
Do we have a problem?
Please just take the kid. The songs of eons past tell of a Lego customizer who would one day finish his Mandalorian customs and be done with Star Wars projects indefinitely, or at least until the Obi-Wan Kenobi series picks up. Did you know these are the only customs, or at least the main 4 primary customs, are the only ones that have ever been with me on a plane? I don't know why you needed to know that, but guys, that is gonna do it for the Mandalorian Season 2 showcase. Did you survive it? Did you make it all the way through to the end? It's okay if you skipped to get here. I understand. I would have too. But again, if you could leave a like, that would very much be the way. And special thanks to all of my patrons who have been following along over there since the beginning, seeing their reactions to each bit of progress on this project. Honestly, kept it alive. And again, huge thanks to Nate's Minifigs, LM9, Tuminio, Forge 510, and everyone who directly or indirectly contributed to this showcase in some way. These figures never would have looked so good without them. And now this is the part where I make promises that I only hope I can keep, but I think it's doable, maybe. Probably. So Spider-Man No Way Home is coming up very fast, and while I would have loved to squeeze in Thor and Smart Hulk from Endgame, I actually started working on the Hulk a little bit again, and I'd love to make Hawkeye or Kate Bishop from that series. No Way Home is this channel's next priority. I want to do my best to adequately celebrate that film before I move on to The Batman and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So please wish me luck. As always, there are so many many customs I want to be making, but somehow never enough time as these years blur together. That being said though, thank you all again so much for supporting me in the work and these custom mini people whenever I do finish them. And please keep creating, continue to inspire and be inspired as you guys always have for me. And I will see you guys next time. This is the way. And Bo-Katan, both inspired by their live-action debuts. Can't breathe. But it worked out. Of course. And that was not fun, but... oh my god. Inside the torso, and that was not fun, but it... You two. It's been a long time.
Do we know you?
Doesn't matter. Boba Fett, along with two dark oh, I missed Luke. Oops. Ahsoka Tano into live action at... I blew it. I blew it. I'm rusty. I'm very rusty. Are you also a Jedi? I am. Wait, also, was there another? Two, actually. What were their names? The one we know, her name is Ahsoka Tano. My father's apprentice. Look, pal, I don't know who your father is.
Wait, you're that Anakin guy's kid? Ahsoka's Jedi Master?
Why do you all know each other? Ahsoka Tano is alive, but I can never seem to catch up with her. I sense canon barriers. Who was the other Jedi? He said his name was Plo Koon? The Jedi Master from the Clone Wars. The one who brought her to the temple as a child. He perished. Look, I don't know. I have to meet them. They must still be on board. Yeah, I mean, probably. May the Force be with you. Hey, what about the kid? And then, whoa, we are gone. Totally out of focus. That's incredible.
Take the Foundling to the city of Kaladin on the forest planet of Corvus. There you will find Kiadi Mundi.
Hi. With the 3D printed chest armor pieces, with the 3D printed chest armor with Boba's jetpack being attached via those micromagnets. being attached via the micromagnets. Grogu?
Yes, that's his name. He also says you're kind of ugly under that helmet.
What? Me?
Yeah, oh, he says you wouldn't be shit without that Beskar armor.
You know what? Which I also did for Bo, but I didn't mention, Katie Sackhoff's surprise live... Blew it, like, within the first 2 seconds.
Put some tea on, we'll be up in a minute.
What? We made tea. Oh, and also this. Koska and Axe Woves, who you'll see in just... Who you...
What? This bounty hunter was your guardian? Oh, he wasn't a bounty hunter.
Her jetpack is really detailed too and took quite a while to paint. I need to breathe before these segments sometimes, man. But Bo was looking really lonely without her 2 fellow Mandalorian resistance fighters that accompanied her in Season 2, so I decided to still at least make a couple half customs up. I need to put more commas in this script. You know, I look like an omelet now because of you. I don't have time for this right now, but I will make it up to you. Ah, the Polynesian spa. Rangefinder, but on this helmet now, and I have... It's gone.
Hello, it is I, Jedi Master of Empire. I have come to reclaim my child. I have been in a custody battle with Yaddle for many years.
Look, pal, you're about 3 Jedi too late. Get off our ship.
Oh, but you see, I am no Jedi. And Yaddle is no more.